So, I recently caught up to the My Hero Academia manga, and as I was reading through 2 years worth of content I'd effectively slept on, I couldn't help but notice a theme emerging throughout the course of the whole story that really struck me as interesting. It struck me that at the heart of My Hero Academia, there's this struggle between two equal and opposite forces. There's this life or death struggle between the forces of light, good, hope, and a constructive attitude towards society, in other words, the forces of optimism, and the forces of pessimism, and by that I mean the forces of darkness, nihilism, cynicism, hopelessness, and despair. The very forces that would seek to destroy society rather than remake, reform, or remodel it, depending on the vision or ideology of the actor in question. But what's even more interesting to me is that at the core of this conflict, the forces of pessimism aren't just outright dismissed by Horikoshi or the narrative. They aren't belittled in a childish way or presented in a straw man-like manner. In fact, pessimism seems to serve a role in this story similar to the role played by cynic philosophers like Diogenes in ancient Greece. Pessimism, or rather the cynical attitude that characterizes it in My Hero Academia, is a weapon of the weak, a tool of the marginalized. Pessimism is an instrument of the villains and former heroes who have been turned into outcasts. Their attitude is genuinely due to the failures of hero society. Their disillusionment with its trappings is valid but not righteous. Save for one distinct and overarching figure, the villains of My Hero Academia are casually tossed aside due to their brutal nature or their appearance, driven into madness by their own choices and their trauma-driven pasts, moved forward by personal or ideological reasons like attempting to carry out the dream of restoring an organization to its former glory, love, or a desire for fame and notoriety, the desire to bring about a revolutionary society, defacing human beings in an effort to use scientific knowledge to create the perfect work of art, revenge and a personal grudge against a deadbeat father, attempting to please a father figure, consumed by the desire to root out the corruption at the heart of a carceral state and a consumer society either through selective purges or wanton destruction. In other words, each of these villains is surprisingly relatable and human in their flaws. We might not agree with their views, and the story may paint their actions in a negative light, but we can understand why they act as they do and what factors drove them to become the people they are today. In other words, we can empathize with the very real and very painful experiences of oppression that drove those individuals into lifestyles of crime and destruction. And this ability to empathize with our villains is key, because empathy lets us understand their perspectives. It lets us identify that they are in the right in naming a series of piercing truths about a society that has failed vast segments of its population. They rightfully question the values of a hero society guilty of either failing to deliver them justice, or responsible for actively criminalizing and penalizing them and others rather than addressing the social problems at the root of their villainy or rehabilitating them once they have committed a criminal act. Their marginal position and fearless desire to express their truth is what connects these villains to the cynics of ancient Greece. The cynics used to go around living in destitution as outcasts and pariahs, willingly and impudently critiquing the status quo, finding fault with conventional values and exposing all manner of human hypocrisy. Where the cynics and our villains differ, however, is in their intentions and their adherence to a strict set of morals. While many cynics critique society out of a love for society and out of a wish to make it better, our villains in My Hero Academia are driven by egotistical goals rather than strict moral principles. Even a figure like Stain is willing to selfishly blame and murder individual heroes for what is essentially a societal problem, the corporate structure of hero society. This egoism is a fatal character flaw that many if not all of these characters share. Their desperation-driven retreat into self-absorption, ideology, or ego fragility has made them easily manipulatable by those who would seek to destroy the world if only it meant that they could rule over its ashes. Enter All For One. All For One is the consummate bad guy, the bad guy you love to hate, the cartoonishly evil megalomaniac. Except he's not, actually. When you look at him through the lens of a man who's been driven by a fundamental lack to the depths of emptiness and greed, what emerges is a figure who is pure evil but not totally inhuman. All For One is ironically a reflection of many of the most twisted aspects of hero society. He is an embodiment of greed built into the corporate and consumerist structure of society. He is also the best example of what happens when blind obedience and worshipping violence as the solution to social problems reaches their apex in a single individual. He's like the negative image of All Might in that sense. While All Might inspires others as a symbol of peace and public safety, All for One epitomizes disorder reigning supreme in the service of a singular godlike entity. He's coldly rational, the kind of rationality that's needed to order and run society in the first place, to lead without letting character flaws get in the way. That's what makes him so dangerous, his in-depth understanding of the human ego and his ability to tempt, deceive, manipulate, and use others through the calculated use of reason and empathy. He represents the pitfalls of pessimism to the degree that he represents what happens when a cynically self-interested actor exploits the pessimism of others to fuel nihilism and a might overwrite mentality so that they can extract benefits as they see fit. The other side of the scale looks different. It's Deku, it's All Might, it's the heroes of UA, it's the people who can look at the grim realities of the world and smile anyways, or those who can persevere through sheer force of will into trying to be a better person. It's those who can look at the darkness of humanity in the face on a day-to-day basis and still choose to be a hero. Heroes are people who are tethered to others and who let that sense of shared responsibility and their will to protect the weak drive them forward. It's the people who at least try to live up to that ideal even when they recognize that they are likely bound to fail in ways that will hurt themselves or others. At their best, they are symbols of courage, of the great feats that humanity is able to accomplish when we overcome our mental and physical limits for others. There's a lot that I could say if I were to zero in on each individual character of this world, or even just the ones who have major story beats or character arcs, and the degree that their character arcs see this dynamic of pessimism and optimism unfold. But here, I really want to focus on Deku. Deku's our main character, so in many ways this choice is obvious, but I feel like what makes his character arc and impact on the story particularly important to focus on is how it's rarely, if ever, presented through this lens. Viewed through the lens of the struggle between optimism and pessimism, Deku is close to perfect as a main character for this type of story. That's right, I said it. He's an unbridled optimist, but he's also a cynic. His is the sort of optimism that developed in response to a cruel world and that is constantly tested and refined in its resilience against the world of MHA. 生まれながらに平等じゃない。これが These are some of the first words that we hear our narrator, Deku, tell us from the distant future as he reflects back upon the events of the main story timeline. These are not the words of a youthfully naive idealist caught in a fantasy abstracted from reality. These are the words of a marginalized child stripped of innocence at a young age. Deku was exposed to the harsh realities of the world the moment he realized that he lacked the genetic tools to become what he dreamed to be, a hero, and that this deficiency made him no better than trash in the eyes of many within a quirk-dominated society. These are also, however, the words of a child who desperately clung on to the sense of hope that he could be a hero despite the great odds stacked against him. Why? Because he needed to stick to this dream to have any hope of surviving as the person who he so desperately wanted to be. Despite being told that he could not be this person by his hero All Might, the living symbol of peace, he nevertheless persisted. He dared to act bravely by trying to save his friend when no one else could. This inspired All Might to push beyond his limits to rescue Deku and Bakugo. And for this action, Deku was amply rewarded. He was given an opportunity to acquire a power beyond his imagination, and the chance to train and be mentored by his hero. He was given the chance to attend his dream school and carve out a legacy for himself. But the uphill battle would only start from here. Thank you all sincerely for watching this video.